Last time on Everything 80s, the Mind Flayer's back. We've got a new Starcourt Mall. The Russians are everywhere. Joyce and Hopper seem to be getting closer. And what's happening with Billy? We now return to the Everything 80s podcast, Stranger Things Season 3 Recap Special Part 2. Hey guys, what's happening? We're back. We're going to pick right where we left off at the end of episode 4. In case you're just checking this out now, go back and listen to the first episode recap just so you can get up to speed with Stranger Things Season 3 and spoilers everywhere, obviously. In case you haven't, go watch the whole series and you can come back and check all this good stuff out. So we are now on chapter 5, entitled The Flayed. And this episode is like a kind of like a true crime sort of horror movie almost. It has that true crime style, but one that mixes in like those sort of classic horror movie tropes. The whole episode is really able to convey this sort of sense of anxiety that a true horror movie does, that it's not necessarily like in your face jump scares. It's more the anticipation, the sense of fear and dread conveys, and the whole episode conveys this sense of paranoia. I think that was reflected from this time of like Cold War tensions that were rising in the 80s between Russia and the U.S. And I think that's what the core of not only a big part of the season, but this episode specifically. So we're now down deep below the Starcourt Mall with Erica, Steve, Dustin, and Robin after that perilous elevator drop. And they're just hanging out in there. And at the meantime, Joyce and Hopper have been checking out the different properties that the Starcourt Mall organization had been looking into for expansion. So they haven't found a lot until they get to Hess Farms. In the basement there, they find some sort of Russian setup with two scientists before that Terminator guy comes back to shoot out with Hopper. Joyce, Hopper, one of the Russians whose name is Alexei, but Hopper keeps calling him Smirnov, escape while the Terminator stalks them, and then we cue the opening credits. I was wondering if there's anything significant about calling this place Hess Farms. So I'm like, I don't know if I missed anything back in the show that was completely obvious, and that was just the name of the family. But the one thing might be related is to the Hess Corporation, which is a real-life energy company that started back in 1919. Or there's other possibility of Rudolf Hess, who was a leading member of the Nazi Party and an appointed deputy to Hitler. But he actually went rogue and flew to Scotland during World War II to try to negotiate peace with the UK, but was taken prisoner and everything. So I don't know if that's reflected in what's happening. So Hopper, Joyce, and Alexei are having to travel through the woods on foot after Hopper's car engine explodes. And Lucas, Mike, and Will are trying to figure out how to stop the Mind Flayer. So we see a good shot of Lucas eating a box of classic Cocoa Puffs, as I continue to point out obvious cereal references along with other 80s references. So back in the elevator, the four of them are now trying to escape, and a classic nod to Indiana Jones as Steve uses one of the canisters to stop the door from closing to the ground before pulling it out, just the way Indiana Jones did with the idol. But it crushes the canister, and this green ooze just like eats through the floor. The other kids, along with Nancy and Jonathan, decide to see if they can track Mrs. Driscoll back to wherever she's been connected to. And so they all jump into their family station wagon in a scene that looks very right out of the A-Team. Like, quick door closing, seats buckling. I thought it was pretty sweet. Joyce and Hopper, along with Alexei, have come across 7-Eleven. And we get our third product placement / appearance of New Coke. Hopper is then able to commandeer a citizen's car, and who looks a lot like right out of Miami Vice, the guy's car they take, and they peel off to Strike Zone by Loverboy. And I'm also pointing out any obvious 80s songs throughout the episodes. So the kids are realizing that these new monsters, or monster, whatever it is, are requiring chemicals for some reason, which was never the case when Will was possessed by them. So there's a bit of a throwback to the movie Heathers, when they're around, they're in the Holloway's house and they're seeing the chemicals used there. And in Heathers, which also starred Winona Ryder, she has to kill some of the people using chemicals. And, you know, also you have a character named Heather. So that's another significant movie connected to Stranger Things. And this season, Hopper and Joyce have brought Alexei to Murray Bowman, if you remember him, the private investigator who we met in season 2. Interesting here, speaking like character developments, Joyce is really taking command of most situations now, which seems like a real evolution in her character, where before she was always, you know, completely panicked, out of control, irrational, you know, borderline hysterical, with good cause, obviously. But what we're seeing now is that she's more like level-headed, she's more focused, she's more like commanding, straightforward, controlling the situation. So it's interesting to see that. Another interesting thing, again, this is just a weird throwaway, but beneath this whole while they're at Murray's house and talking, there's a song playing, an old song by Sid Phillips and his Melodians, that was the name of the orchestra, called The Boogeyman. And, you know, so who's, you know, the boogeyman? Is it the Russians? Is it you know, I just thought that's interesting underneath. So Steve, Erica, Dustin, and Robin have made it through this labyrinth of underground corridors, and they're seeing a ton of Russian activity going on. They're able to get into a room that has a real control center feel out of the Death Star in Star Wars, including Steve taking out the guard, which seems 1,000,000% modeled after Han Solo taking out the guards in that control room. When you watch this episode, it looks like the exact set they've taken it. You know, when they walk in with the stormtrooper outfits in the cell block detention area, it's exactly that. They've also been discussing promethium, which is what they think is the actual stuff in the canisters, which is a real element, and it has the symbol of capital P, small m. And this real life thing, it glows green, and it has different uses, but one of them is for, again, in the real world, for nuclear batteries for guided missiles, and it's basically an energy source, and that's what it's being used for here, because deep beneath the Starcourt Mall used as an energy source are these canisters and this promethium for a giant laser, which is the exact one we saw in Russia at the start of episode 1. So they've either brought it over or they've built a new one, and they're attempting to cut into the Upside Down. So it looks like the Upside Down exists in various places all around the world. And again, like I mentioned, I think this giant laser looks like the one from the Howard the Duck movie, the awful Howard the Duck movie. But if you've seen it, you remember that part. So the kids are trying to see Mrs. Driscoll in the hospital, but all hell's about to break loose. Before that, we see Mike and Lucas and, you know, just pointing out random 80s foods and references. So they're trying to get some stuff from the vending machine, and we see like the classic packaging of like Skittles and Reese's Pieces and Snickers. And then there's a specifically branded Kit Kat, which happened in the summer of 1985, that had a $150,000 giveaway. I don't know if you remember this. It's a real thing where you would find stickers in the packaging and looking for the top prize, which was $25,000. And they called it Kit Kat Cash, all spelt with a K. So I don't know whoever came up with that, but I'm assuming and hoping they were fired for it because it's right on the packaging. So now Nancy and Jonathan are getting chased like full horror movie style through the hospital by Bruce and Ted. This has one of the worst lines of the entire 3 seasons, and it was bound to happen. But Bruce is like, keeps going Marco, you know, trying to hunt down Nancy, and she answers Polo before hitting him with a fire extinguisher, which was just idiotic, but whatever. They're allowed to have a few like that. The thing is, though, we now see both characters are feeling the same pain, even though one is being hit. The two of them then melt into a goo, again reminiscent of the Blob from the movie The Blob, and then we see them form into a monster that is the one we see at the very end of the first trailer in the hallway in the hospital. So that's what that is. It looks like different infected people can mesh together to form this monster at any time. So I don't know if the Mind Flayer's overseeing this. I don't know if there can be multiple monsters or can there only be one at the same time. So that's the fifth episode. And again, like a pretty straightforward, but I'd say not my least favorite of all 8. And again, that's not saying it's bad ever. I never discredit a Stranger Things episode because everything they do is amazing. And again, how appreciative I am of having a show like this. So I'd say it's the least best of all 8, but it serves its purpose. And another thing I noticed in this issue, or sorry, in this show, and an kind of issue I've had, is that I don't think there's as much use of the original score that's created by Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein. It's obviously there, but I don't seem to notice it as much as compared to the first season, where it was just like underplayed over every scene. And again, more in the second. Like, I love the inclusion of songs from the 80s and the time era, but the original music they have is so epic. I just wish there was more of it. So that you might not see the same thing, but whatever. So now we're starting to see more connections being made, more pieces of the puzzle coming together. We're seeing how the infected zombies of Hawkins are really functioning, and we know what's going on with the Starcourt Mall, but how is this all going to play together? So I give episode 5 a B-. So now we're on to chapter 6, which is called E Pluribus Unum, which we know means out of the many, one. And that's what we're looking at when it comes to the Mind Flayer. This thing is like a Voltron of sorts, and the army it's building may be for its own power, or we're starting to figure out what's going on. And this one gets really intense, some hardcore battle scenes. And again, to me, it has another kind of Jurassic Park type feel to it. We realize more how the Upside Down really works, and we're learning about the Starcourt Mall organization and what they're doing. So we start with Dustin and Jonathan, and they're seeing that giant laser or that key trying to cut into the Upside Down. We later learn that 11, when closing the gate at the end of season 2, was able to weaken it. So it was closed, but it was weakened. And the Russians have learned that this weakening is a secret to cutting into it. And that's why they weren't able to do it with the portion they had tried on in Russia. So Dustin and Steve have to get Robin and Eric up to speed on basically everything they don't know about what's happened in the first 2 seasons. So they do that. Also, it took me a little bit to get this, but the laser key is very Death Star tractor beam, you know, as you see the thing blasting into it and the way it's set up and everything like that. So the rest of the kids, including Nancy and Jonathan, they're still in the hospital. And again, I think this whole season is playing out in exact real time. Like, the length of the episodes and everything are actually playing out exactly how it would if this was really happening. So they've seen, we've seen the goo of Ted and Bruce form together into the monster. We're now we've seen the monster through the various episodes, but it's on full attack mode now. And the bunch of them are seeing it for the first time. There's a good bit of censorship where Max is about to drop an F-bomb, but the monster roars over it. And 11, they battle the hell out of each other. And again, you can feel the fight scenes more now. They have like more, I don't know, like texture to them. Like you can almost like feel them happening. Side note, I thought the F-bomb censor thing was kind of interesting because I like the amount of swearing they use in Stranger Things, and I think they could even ramp it up a bit, as like a timely F-bomb is always effective. But I think they do a good job of using like natural language as kids would use, but it's not overly gratuitous. But either way, so the blob monster retreats with its blob tail between its legs, and we see Billy and Heather, who realize that it's time, and we'll find out what that means as the opening credits roll. I haven't mentioned this, but I think Stranger Things is the only Netflix show where I never skip intro, because watching the title credits and hearing that music just sets the tone always for the show. It gives you a second to just sort of like process what's happening, whereas like every other show, whether it's The Office or anything you regularly watch, you always like skip credits. I don't do it on Stranger Things. So we then see the setup for the city fair happening as we hear Stand Up and Meet Your Brother by Possum River playing. Mayor Klein, who's looking an awful lot like Gordon Gekko now from Wall Street, is meeting with that Terminator guy while Murray, Joyce, and Hopper and Alexei are trying to negotiate between them while he's watching Looney Tunes cartoons. So Hopper gives Alexei the chance to escape. Like, they need to know what's going on, what's happening with the mall, what's like the Russian meaning behind all this. Hopper gives Alexei the chance to escape, but he calls his bluff as we see him try to drive off listening to the Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters, but only to return back because he knows if he does go, he'll be seen as a traitor and probably killed by the Terminator. There's also interesting use of the theme song called The Wild Ride, which is from the movie Midnight Run, composed by Danny Elfman. It seems appropriate in this sense, but I couldn't figure it out. That movie came out in 1988. It's still catchy. I think it was just that fit the scene, and it wasn't significant for any other reason. Besides that, it is like the actual wild ride they're going on. Steve and Robin have been held hostage by the Russians, who are trying to find out who they work for. And the other kids at that time are trying to find out how to track the Mind Flayer. So the people who are infected, or what they call flayed, are wandering around out there, and we don't know how out of control this is getting and how many people have been infected. 11 is still now trying to track down Billy and using her powers and abilities to find him in her subconscious. While that's going on, Eric and Dustin are trying to figure out how to get out of the underground maze, and they crawl out from beneath the floor, which seems like a real nod to the stowaway compartments on the Millennium Falcon. Steve and Robin are having a heart-to-heart. They're now tied up back-to-back on two chairs in some little Russian room. This reminded me of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, where Indy and his dad are tied up back-to-back. Remember that, before they accidentally set the room on fire and everything like that. So they end up both being drugged to make them talk. The other kids are now hiding out at Hopper's cabin in the woods. So like Mike, 11, Max, Will, them. And they really realize they need to find the source of the Mind Flayer. And 11 is realizing that Billy knows. Well, so she's now in the black subconscious. She finds him, but now he's able to physically grab hold of her, which wasn't a possibility before this. So 11 still can see into him and knows that Billy's infected and tormented, and she's trying to see what happened to cause all this. And the guy who plays Billy, I think it's Dacre, I don't know if you say that right, Dacre Montgomery, he's amazing in this whole series, and especially these few episodes, and really like drives the tone and sort of the mood of everything. Very like out of, if you ever saw the movie The Lost Boys, like really captures that, I think. And I don't know, it's a huge impact, I feel. So this is a really kind of amazingly surreal scene where 11 is able to be transported back to California, where Billy and Max are from. And she sees Billy as a carefree kid, but is able to see the progression of all the darkness that begins to impact him. And like, speaking of acting too, Millie Bobby Brown is unbelievable in this whole season. Like, all the kids are, but like, I usually hate child actors, but like all of them, and she's phenomenal specifically in the whole series. So what we witness is that Billy was very close to his mother, and then his father's the ultimate bastard, and it's caused Billy's abusive ways that we got a little glimpse of in season 2, but we're seeing now how it really developed. So that made me wonder if the Mind Flayer is able to prey on broken people like this, and that's why it's able to infiltrate and infect them. I mean, if you think like Will, he came from a bad situation too, not as bad as Billy's, but like, you know, the broken home, and he was kind of a tortured soul type thing. So is the Mind Flayer able to recognize this vulnerability and target them? I don't know, just something I thought. So 11 is able to trace back the exact moment when the Mind Flayer Billy connection happened at that steel mill. But she comes to not back into the real world, but it's sort of a phantom environment where Billy and Heather appear. So Billy, who is essentially the Mind Flayer at this point, informs 11 that she's the one that released him into the world, and that she will have to let him or them stay. The flayed people, the infected zombie-like people, are now summoned to kind of build a super monster, which it is being done for the sole reason to destroy 11. That's why this monster is here. She is the only thing that can prevent the evolution and progression of the Mind Flayer. This scene is nuts, and it plays over an actually opera theme, and I'll get this completely wrong, but it's from an opera based on the life of Gandhi. It's called Satyagraha Act 2 Tagore Confrontation and Rescue. And you can, if you Shazam this during the show, you can, it's crazy intense. And the whole theme of that opera is about men who changed the world, like Gandhi and Einstein. And I don't know, I think it does have a connection, but it works well here, which makes me wonder why they didn't compose their own sort of scores for moments like this, because the stuff they come up with is incredible. But I don't know, whatever, it works. And then we cue the opening credits. Sorry, we cue the end credits. Like I said, it's such an intense episode, and now we're starting to wonder if anyone's actually going to survive. Up until the end part, I found this episode had the most upbeat feel to it. It had a bit of a lighter tone. Like it's legitimately funny. There's a lot of parts over this whole season that actually have made me laugh, and this episode specifically. There wasn't a ton of 80s references in this one because it's, we're really driving the story at this point. Just wait till the next episode, though. So here's a few things I noticed. The obvious one they called out is Erica's My Little Pony backpack, and we realize how much My Little Pony really is its own sort of nerd culture, and it's got its own universe, and it's kind of like Star Wars for girls with how deep it goes in the mythology. Cereal wise, we see some Honey Smacks, which is awesome. The lab, again, where Dustin and Erica are in with the green canisters, is like completely out of Jurassic Park, where they keep all the dinosaur DNA from InGen. Then another cereal, there's Lucky Charms, and this one's actually specific because the rainbows on it help to trigger Eleven's memory when she sees that, because you remember back in the lab and when she was younger there and they had rainbows on the wall, and it sort of triggered all that. And then when 11 is blindfolding herself, it's always thought to be reminiscent of the Karate Kid, but to me it always had this has more of a Rambo theme to me when he would tie on his bandana. But okay, so that's wrapping up the 6th episode. This one I gave a B+. Okay, on to chapter 7 called The Bite, and holy crap, TV doesn't get much better than this. This is one of the best TV shows, period, I can ever remember. And it's so, not just of like the whole, this 3-season story or whatever, but like of anything. This one's chock full of nostalgia. It's got a real actual like major movie feel to it. Like it feels like this should be up on the big screen, and we journey into one of the greatest movies ever made. So let's look at it. We start with the setup of the fun fair, and we open to Rock in the USA by John Mellencamp, and it's being presented by Mayor Klein. This shot as they're going up over has like sort of a real Hill Valley 1885 sense to it from Back to the Future 3. And then, speaking of Back to the Future, which will keep spoiler alerts everywhere here, we get that the Washington Post March, if you know, when they're introducing Mayor Klein, and that is played from Mayor Red Thomas's mayoral campaign car from Back to the Future. You can probably picture what I'm referring to, and when you see it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So there, once the fair is going on, there's a part where the Wheeler family is sitting on top of the Ferris wheel, and it stops at the top to watch the fireworks. But in a very Jurassic Park type way, we see something gigantic moving through the trees. This seemed like they actually had taken the footage from Jurassic Park to put it in, but whatever, it's still awesome. And then we cue the opening credits. So the kids in the cabin realize they're about to be targeted because Will's spidey sense is now tingling. And while that's going on, Dustin and Erica have finally got so Steve and Robin have been fully drugged up, and they're finally able to rescue them and get out of there. And so interesting, like looking at the character developments over the course of the season, Dustin to me emerges as the real like hero of this entire season. Like he's taken command of all the situations, and he seems to be the authority now, even for being a kid. Like he's like the most adult of all of them. We're back at the cabin now, and the kids, along with Jonathan and Nancy, are preparing to fight the monster that they are certain is about to show up. This time, the monster, because it's been, merging with all these flayed people, is gigantic. So 11 has her work cut out for him. Another massive battle scene. She's able to hold it off for a while, but needs help with from Nancy. She's, shooting it in the throat. Lucas is cutting off the tongue. That felt like a nod to King Kong, the original King Kong from the 30s, where it fights that dinosaur T-Rex thing and then cuts the tongue out at the end. And then in the greatest scene of the entire thing, Dustin and Erica are trying to hide Steve and Robin, and they're walking through they've got out into the sort of back rooms of the mall. They get into the movie theater and they walk into one where Back to the Future is playing, and we're seeing the actual footage of Back to the Future playing for the crowd. So Back to the Future came out on July 3rd, 1985. So I'm thinking this is the actual debut day, and seems evident as, the crowd erupts in applause at the very end. Back to the Future was #1 for 11 straight weeks and was hands down the biggest money-making movie of 1985. And a lot of big movies came out that year, looking like, The Goonies and The Breakfast Club, and, so a lot of cool stuff. So seeing the crossover of this actual movie and this new modern classic TV show is tremendous. And, it's honestly like a real service and paying tribute to it by actually showing the movie, which had a massive influence on this whole show and series and creators. And then this I thought was specific, though. When they're leaving the theater, Dustin's going out to try and contact the others. The last words we hear is, "You built a time machine," which is usually followed like out of a DeLorean, but it was just, "You built a time machine." And I thought that was specific and maybe leading to something. But while that's going on, Joyce Hopper and Alexei are heading to the Starcourt Mall, hoping they can get in and dismantle the laser. And they've also tried to call the National Guard, and they hope they've called them in properly. The kids break into a supermarket to get supplies and bandages to Elle, who's been bitten by that monster. Lucas and Mike find a bunch of fireworks they feel might really work well, kind of makeshift ammunition. And then 80s cereal-wise, we see some awesome ones, like specifically right in your face, like Smurf Berry Crunch, Mr. T cereal, Ghostbusters cereal, Rainbow Bright cereal, Pac-Man, Cookie Crisp, Honeycomb, Cocoa Puffs, Donkey Kong cereal, G.I. Joe cereal, which I'd never even heard of, and I thought I knew everything about this. But then we get another amazing scene where Dustin is finally able to contact Mike via walkie-talkie, but he's doing it in the projector room of the theater playing Back to the Future. So we hear that classic Alan Silvestri Back to the Future score while they're engaging. So again, it's like this perfect homage to how Marty McFly needed walkie-talkies for conversation with Doc. And that same thing is happening, played out to the theme song of this awesome movie. It's an amazing scene. And then, Dustin saying, "Please not now" to the dead walkie-talkie batteries. And it's hard not to think of Marty saying the same thing when the DeLorean dies on the starting line, when he's about to go back at the end of the first movie. Again, I'm just assuming you know every part of Back to the Future. Like I said, if not, you'll have to find another podcast. And then there's a hilarious mention of of Steve mentioning about, like, because they're drugged up trying to watch this thing, and they're like asking about why that guy was trying to hook up with his mother and whatever. Now we go back to the supermarket and we get this brilliant inclusion of new Coke and some amazing self-awareness of Stranger Things as a show. So what we're looking at here is Lucas is drinking the new Coke, and the kids are like, "How can you drink that?" Because remember, like, the backlash is real and not a lot of people liked it, but he was like adamant and going against it. And he starts comparing it to The Thing, the movie The Thing, the John Carpenter remake, and saying how it's sweeter, bolder, better. And this just seems so self-referential and so self-aware of the show, because Stranger Things has often been compared to, not only The Thing, but a ton of other 80s classics. And some people think, the classics are best left as the classics and trying not to recreate them. So it shows their own awareness of what they're doing, but also, like, maybe they see it as a better version because they're able to take so many classics things and then kind of put their own spin and kind of a bolder take on it, or maybe a bit of a better take. And, just including the word "thing" in the title shows the importance of the movie The Thing, which you'll have to definitely check out if you haven't. And the kids are arguing about if it's the same concept or not, you know, but they're talking about new Coke and original Coke, but it's still reflective of Stranger Things and the world of 80s nostalgia and movies. And, you know, so it's like a genuine real life discussion that people have about the show. But in this case, they're doing it about new Coke and original Coke, which was actually happening at the same time too. Like, I don't know, I could dissect that scene for days. I thought it was amazing. So we get a long scene in the bathroom where Steve and Robin have finally come down off their drug hallucination, and Robin admits that, so they, you know, Steve thinks they're a thing, but she admits it was a female classmate she always liked, and it wasn't necessarily Steve per se. Seemed a little clunky how they did that. I think there was a better opportunity with how they introduced that whole thing, but it was a good like bonding scene between them, and as far as appreciating the characters more, so that still works, I think. And then Steve drops another obvious Back to the Future reference when they're talking about this girl and how he says she's cute and all, which is completely like Lorraine describing George McFly. So now they're at Hopper, and Joyce and Alexia are at the fun fair, and they see Mayor Klein, and who's talking on an epic 80s style car phone, kind of Zach Morris-ish. The thing though is, while running through the fair, Alexei is tracked down by that Terminator who shoots him with a gun fitted with a silencer after he just won a Woody Woodpecker, which is unfortunate from watching Looney Tunes and Woody Woodpecker earlier. As the kids have left the supermarket, Eleven has left some blood on the ground, and Billy's able to track it down, basically like a shark. And then we're back at Back to the Future, so Dustin and Erica can get out with Robin and Steve with the whole crowd, so they can try and blend in because the Russians are looking for them in the mall. So we then get to see the movie marquee, and this is interesting because there's some great choices on there that not only were playing that July 3rd weekend, or the July 4th weekend of that year. July 3rd was a Wednesday. I looked this up. But the movies are also perfectly timed because they relate to this season of Stranger Things. So one thing is we see a poster for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was about to come out on July 26th. We see Return to Oz, which was kind of a weird movie, but again, you know, Return to Oz, they're going back like the same way in Stranger Things. It's going back to the whole idea of the upside down and everything like that. Then the movie Fletch, which I mentioned already about being the influence for the Nancy story arc through this season. The movie Cocoon, again, very similar to what's happening with these creatures and the mind flare and everything. Then a movie called The Stuff, which is a horror movie that was very similar to The Blob, which has been, you know, reflected in this season. Then a movie called Daryl, which I'd forgotten about, and it's a story of a 10-year-old boy that's actually a government-controlled robot, kind of like how 11 was. So, I don't know, pretty interesting that all those movies were at the same time, and then they specifically would use those. So, back at the fair, the Terminator has chased down Hopper into a giant fun house and includes a hall of mirrors. And there is no way this is a coincidence, but if you look, again, go on the show notes, if you go to everything80spodcast.com and all the breakdowns for each episode, I included a screenshot, but on the front of the fun house, there's an image of a clown that looks extremely a lot like Pennywise from It. And there's been a lot already covered about It and Stranger Things, about them existing in the same universe. Like if you remember from season 2, Bob talks about kind of living in like New England in the Northeast, where It and a lot of Stephen King movies are based. And he talks about this encounter with this clown that scared him and standing up to it, which again is the premise of It. And we also see kind of around this time, while the other people are playing games and Alexi's playing a game, a red balloon popping. So, I mean, no coincidence here, but amazing. Check that picture out if you can. So Hopper is able to shoot the Terminator, who's wearing a Doc Brown inspired bulletproof vest. We hear the creepy clown laugh again from the fun house. We now get a full reunion between Mike, Max, 11, Lucas, Jonathan, Nancy for the first time at the mall, with Dustin, Steve, Robin, and Erica. And a few of them are meeting for the first time. Like, you know, Robin doesn't know who 11 is, you know, so it's finally this culmination coming together. 11's also taken out the Russian thugs in the mall by throwing a car at them. We now realize that something is infecting the cut on Elle's leg, and she screams in pain as it looks like that Battle of Starcourt Mall is about to begin. So if you didn't tell how much I love this episode, but this episode specifically solidifies everything that makes Stranger Things the absolute like modern classic that it is, and how it's been called a love letter to the 80s. And this just combines so much classic stuff from the 80s, but plays it out to a modern audience. And it's just like, you know, Lucas's commentary on New Coke, how it's sweeter, bolder, and dare I say better. You know, it takes those best things that we liked, but puts them into sort of a modern packaging. You know, taking all those best pop culture things and putting it together. So, you know, again, the only thing I could say that's bad about this episode is I'll never get to watch it again for the first time. So I give it a A++, all that stuff. Okay. We now move on to the final episode, Chapter 8, The Battle of Starcourt. And, you know, we get a climactic final battle. We get an emotional send-off. We get, just in case you haven't heard me say it, this is spoiler territory everywhere. We get the loss of some major characters. You know, the whole season's been brilliant, and I think the finale works very well. And it seems more appropriate to call this, like, instead of like a season, it's more like a movie, because you tend to watch it all, either people are watching all in one sitting or very close together. It's not, you know, it's not a series, it's not a movie, it's something in between. So, you know, we're now back at the mall, and 11 is kind of succumbing to the monster bite, and they realize they have to extract it out of her. So she's able to use her own powers to pull out this small, like, bit of creature. It tries to run away, but it's stomped on by Hopper. Him and Joyce have made it to the mall with Murray. Cue the opening credits. We're ready to go. Murray has a map for the mall, and they will use that to find the key, which is trying to open the gate to the Upside Down. So they need good walkie assistance. So the group of Dustin, Steve, Robin, and Erica, who have given themselves the code name Scoop Troop. Some people said it was Goof Troop that I read in different reviews, but Goof Troop didn't come out till 1992, I think. And I'm pretty sure they're called Scoop Troop. Basically, they're taking the car to the antenna that they had put up on the hill so they can get better reception. So they peel off listening to the song Higher and Higher by Jackie Wilson. Then we see a shot of Billy in his car in the parking lot. So this had a very Back to the Future Twin Pines Mall vibe to it, but it also can be seen as a nod to the movie Carrie. So either one. So the other group now is trying to escape, and they are going in the station wagon, and they've been nicknamed Griswold in homage to the Griswold family station wagon from National Lampoon's Vacation. But the car won't go. They need to get a part from the trash car that's inside the mall. And now all hell's about to break loose. The creature, which is gigantic, has tracked down 11, probably due to Billy, and definitely due to Billy, and proceeds to crash through the glass ceiling of the mall. So Joyce and Hopper now underneath the mall have shot up some Russian guards, have taken their uniforms in a very Han Solo, Luke Skywalker stealing a stormtrooper uniform way. So the kids are hiding from the monster in some scenes that look right out of, again, Jurassic Park, with Lex and Tim hiding from the velociraptors in the kitchen, you know, next to the cabinets and whatever. So seems like a nod to that. Hopper and Joyce need a code. Well, they have a code to get the two keys to dismantle the gate, but they have the wrong code. They need what's called Planck's constant, which is a mathematical equation. And it's a physical constant. I obviously had to look this up because I had no friggin' idea. It's a physical constant which relates to the energy carried by a photon to its frequency and stuff. So kind of represented in the energy needed for this whole ray gun and the Upside Down and everything. It's represented by the number 6.626070004. But no one knows it except for who? Dustin's girlfriend, Susie, who we knew we were going to see at some point. You know, they were obviously making her look like she was fictitious. We knew we'd see her. And then this ends up in one of the greatest scenes you'll ever watch in your life. And before Susie, who's living in Utah, lets Dustin have the number, she makes him sing, which apparently is their love song, is the theme song from The Never Ending Story. And I can see how some people might not like this, and it borders on being stupid. Like, it's that close, but it still works. Like, it's able to take this iconic theme song from a beloved movie and create this amazing moment within another beloved TV show. It's so close to going either way, but to me it worked. And then again, I'm sure you're going to have the theme song stuck in your head, or you already did, or you still do right now after watching it. So Billy's managed to capture 11, and he's now offering her up as a sacrifice to the monster. But 11 is able to sort of bypass this infection in Billy, and she's able to connect with his true self. She's able to convey, the love that he really got from his mother. And we now start to see him as a sympathetic character instead of just being a complete dick. So again, maybe a little off, but this has a little bit of an Anakin Skywalker feel to it with Billy, who, seeing what the creature is doing to 11 the same way that Darth Vader is seeing what the Emperor is doing to Luke, and then finally is able to fight the darkness and then fight back against it, and then ends up giving his life to save her. And then speaking of that, this is where we're getting the death stuff. Hopper has put himself in a situation he can't get out of. He's fighting the Terminator. He's able to kill him in a whole scene that's got a very Empire Strikes Back feel to it. From the scene where Luke is, when they're in in Cloud City with Lando and the spice. No, that's not the spice mines. I'm way off here. But when they're trying to trap Luke in the carbonite to take him to Jabba the Hutt for Boba Fett, that whole setting, it's got the exact look of that when the two of them are trying to fight. But as far as blowing up the key, it's now or never, and Joyce has the opportunity to do it, but Hopper's stuck on the other side, which means if she does it, he's going to die. So they both realize what's going to happen. Hopper's okay with it. And then it has a very Tony Stark dying to save the world feel, I found on that scene. And then the whole thing blows up. So we're, of course, meant to be crushed at the death of two major characters. And we are. And I think this brings home my idea that I went over in my preview show, that I really felt a major character needed to die this season. I thought that it was going to be one of the kids, because in the first trailer, they were using Teenage Wasteland by The Who, which is actually Baba O'Reilly. I'm very aware of that. And I thought one of the kids was going to go, and I thought they needed to go to just make this a little more impactful. But the death of Hopper and Billy was a little more unexpected and are obviously major characters, and I still think it works very well. And I think it works even better now that I think how they both had to make the ultimate sacrifice, and that's the ultimate heroic form, and you can't get more heroic than that. So I think it was a perfect combination. We then get an epic shot of the National Guard, which apparently got the message, coming in by helicopter to save the day. We see Paul Reiser for the first time since last season. So we have to think he's going to be involved in an upcoming fourth season, as now the government's got to get more involved with the Russian situation, and they know what's going on. He's privy to everything. Okay, now everyone breathe. Now the aftermath. So it's 3 months later. Everyone's trying to put the pieces of their lives back together. So 11, clearly crushed by the loss of her adopted father, Hopper. And at the same time, she's really kind of coming to grips with the loss of her own powers. She seems more vulnerable before. And it seems that when she's distraught, that her powers aren't as prominent compared to when she's like angry or whatever. Steve and Robin are trying to find or get a job at the video store. We see some, cool things here like Scarface and Mad Max, and then another great Fast Times at Ridgemont High inclusion, including the actual cardboard cutout of Phoebe Cates, who's come up a lot in this season. As far as everything that went down at Hawkins, we see like a commercial for an Inside Edition type show, and it's talking about, the corruption by Mayor Klein, and all the supernatural occurrences, though, are chalked up to things like chemical leaks, accidental fires, and it kind of like a misdirection and government cover-ups and stuff like that. So that, they're trying to pull the wool. Well, they probably still don't know, but that's the story they're seeing. There's also an accusation that the events that keep happening in Hawkins are due to occult practices and devil worshipping, which was a real fear in the 80s. If you grew up, you remember how serious that seemed to be. So now, as we finish up, Joyce is making the correct decision to get the hell out of that house, and her, Will, Jonathan, and 11 are moving. far away. We're not sure. Like they talk about being able to come back together in the holidays and Christmas and stuff like that. We get an emotional moment between Elle and Mike, Nancy and Jonathan, and then there's a very touching letter written to 11 by Hopper, and it continues to explore that idea of growing up and moving forward and having to find your own path. And Will's been going through the same thing too. He's going through the same journey, and they're reminded that the challenges along the journey are what really lead to growth. So like that's a lot of the big theme, is that coming of age story. And I think that was really iterated in the tagline for the season, which is one summer can change everything. And, you know, it did from that sort of superficial monster Hawkins standpoint, but also from the youth coming of age, growing up story, that things are changing. And that summer did change everything. So it finishes there. We end the credits, but hold up, in an extremely Marvel MCU move, we get a post-credit scene, which is awesome. We're taken back to Russia, and what seems like a very Rancor, the monster from beneath Jabba the Hutt's palace, where they feed Luke or any other one they're trying to get rid of. The guards are feeding a prisoner to what turns out to be the Demogorgon. So we have to think that it escaped, or they were able to capture it from the hole they were able to cut in the Upside Down, whether that was in Hawkins or in Russia, but whatever, they've got a hold of it. But as they're trying to decide who to feed to the thing, they walk past these cells and they make note, not the American, when they decide who's going in. So we have to obviously assume this is Hopper. So it seems a little too obvious, but what we have to envision is that he somehow got sucked in the Upside Down, or got his way into the Upside Down before the key blew, and he was able to get out, or was at least captured from it on the Russian side. We can also assume he's not dead, because this is interesting. They use the song Heroes by Peter Gabriel. Do you remember in season 1 when they find Will's supposed dead body, which is the fake body? Heroes is playing there, and we know that Will wasn't dead. Heroes is playing when 11 and Joyce realize that Hopper is dead, but since they use a song, I think we can assume he's not dead. Either way, you know, it just seems a bit too obvious. I don't know if the Duffer Brothers added this on because they thought there was going to be a lot of maybe sadness or backlash of killing off this kind of favorite character, and they tack this song to be like, it's all right. Or it's, you know, specifically there's a teaser, or it's not him in the cell, which is kind of what I'm thinking. I think he's clearly still alive, maybe somewhere in the Upside Down or in another location on Earth. But I think someone else in that cell who's American. It might be Dr. Brenner, Papa from the first season. It could be Murray. We don't know what happened to him. Yeah, so starting to wind this all down here, not just this episode, but the entire season. Some of the references in episode 8, the Battle Star Court, we get our 5th and final product placement of new Coke, which was been amazing through the whole season. I thought it was just going to be sort of like one-off use, like what we saw in that scene of Karen Wheeler drinking it by the pool, but it had an amazing inclusion in the season. And in that last scene, it's Elle trying to use her powers again to crush the Coke can the same way she was instructed to when she was first like kidnapped and living in the lab. So very cool. We've got, what else we have? You know, something like the kids pass on their Dungeons and Dragons book to Erica, who will hopefully immerse herself in them and become even a bigger factor in the coming seasons. We just see little things like Mike wearing an awesome calculator watch and thing. And then, you know, again, the Never Ending Story theme song performed by Lamal. And I think, again, apparently that was supposed to be the Lord of the Rings theme they were going to use in that part, or one of the songs from it, or whatever. But that works well because the Never Ending Story is maybe relevant as far as the Upside Down. Has the Upside Down been around as long as the Earth's been around? Has this been going on for centuries and we're just seeing the place and the people it's affecting now? Or like Elle herself, is she the Never Ending Story? Is she actually able to kind of live forever? Or, you know, we have to assume that the Mind Flayer and the Demogorgons have always existed, so this is a continuing story. I don't know if that was a specific use for it. So again, this episode, you know, it plays out pretty straightforward. That's not a negative critique at all. Everything comes together perfectly, like the death of the monster, the closing of the gate, taking down the Russians, cementing all these relationships, especially like, Joyce and Hopper, and then taking out him and Billy, make for more dramatic impact. And I think it was necessary this season, again, with the whole coming of age theme. And then also like looking at what the monster represents. On one hand, it can be seen as kind of that physical iteration of the fear of the Russians and everything to do with the Cold War, the same way Godzilla was meant to represent the Americans and the atomic bomb. I also think it's meant to represent, that monster's meant to represent that overwhelming fear, again, that comes with growing up. You're not sure it's what. It may seem too intense and frightening. And in either case, the kids in Stranger Things are growing up and they're realizing they're not necessarily kids anymore, taking that, those steps into adulthood. They face more unique challenges than any other teens on Earth, but no matter how big the challenges, they can all seem overwhelming, whether it's, their young love quarrels or a monster taking over the city. So this season, more than lived up to the hype. To me, that's, it's why we get so psyched when those Stranger Things trailers drop, because of the anticipation. And we know that it's now able to be backed up. I mean, the first season came out of nowhere and was a surprise hit. No one knew about it. Like, it wasn't advertised or anything. And the second season was really good, not perfect by far. And I think this third season was the best of all of them by quite a long ways. Cause like now the characters are more established and we understand them and we understand this world and we know what they're going to say. We know what they feel, even before they even say or feel it. So to me, and I don't know if you feel the same way, it like this show and this season specifically felt like it was made just for me. It's like they knew everything I wanted to see and put them in it. And I think that's a sign of good entertainment when you feel like it was made specifically for you. And this really did. So I give this episode, I give it an A-, and I give, the whole season 10 out of 10, whatever you want to call it. It was perfect. It worked in every aspect. It brought in all these amazing pop culture elements and a new story, and they pushed it forward, and we're not sure where it's going to go from here. I'm going to give you my one prediction. This just came up today. I don't know, out of nowhere, in my mind. Maybe someone else has said it and whatever, but for going into the fourth season, there's going to be a fourth season for sure. And it looks pretty likely like there's going to be a fifth season. My thought, the basis for the fourth season. So we're ending here. It's around, by the end of season 3, it's around what? It's around October of 1985. So far, each season has followed the timeline. The first one was set in 83. Season 2 was set in 84. This is 85. So we got to assume it going into 1986. In April of 1986, a significant world event happens that could have been cataclysmic. And it happened in Russia. And I'm talking about Chernobyl. And this could be the most perfect basis for the fourth season. It happened, I think it was April 23rd or April 26th. So that's 6 months after we've left season 3. So the fact that Chernobyl might have been, the idea that it was a nuclear accident might have been cover up for what's going on with the Upside Down and the Key and the Mind Flayer and everything's happening in Russia. There's so many possibilities that can be done with this like cataclysmic world event and what we know about the Upside Down and everything like that. So that's all I'll say. That's my own thought. I hope that happens. Okay, I'm done here. Thank you for listening to this extended 2-part episode. I hope you liked it. If you really like this show, subscribe, give it a rating and review, share it around if you know people who really like Stranger Things want to see a full recap. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I'll see you later. Bye.